My name is Shi Zhou. I'm a senior lecturer at the Department of Computer Science of UCL. And I have a number of research interests, more or less related with network science, in particular internet topology and routing, which has worked on for the last 15 years, really. And recently I work on cloud computing. And also one of my interests is complex network theory. This rich cloud phenomenon, for example, was introduced by myself, actually. And today we're going to talk about some of our latest results on epidemic spreading. And of course, this is a teamwork. I collaborate with a number of students and colleagues at UCL departments of computer science and immunology, and also our friends from the London Center for Sexual Health and HIV Research and University of Oxford. So information spreading is everywhere, actually. We hear so many stories about, a terrible computer virus, outbreak on internet, and we hear rumors spreading in society, and people get infected by disease, HIV, or flu, all sorts of phenomena everywhere. And there are a lot of research work in literature, different models. I can give you a number of models. Some people say there are 30 different models of epidemic spreading. And they have been studied in a population where either it's fully mixed, that is, everyone knows everyone, or in a network that spreading follows a structure. But the work I will present today is different from all of them. Why? Because all the previous works focus on a single spreading mechanism. They assume that an epidemic uses single strategy, single mechanisms to spread around, sometimes across different medias or different networks, but the mechanism is one. But we have observed that many epidemics in real life, either in society, in cyberspace, they actually use more than one spreading mechanism, sometimes 3, 4, or more. To illustrate the idea, I will introduce or discuss 2 real examples. One is an internet worm spread on internet. It's called Conficker. Another is an HIV infection inside the human body, not between people, yes? So that's infection between people. But here I'm talking about infection of HIV virus jumping between different T cells, yes? So these are the 2 real examples that will tell us what I mean by hybrid epidemics. This Conficker worm, appeared first in 2008. Just in a few days, millions of computers get infected. That was one of the most infectious worms ever reported today. And it's different because it has 3 spreading mechanisms. Suppose a computer is infected, it will probe 20 computers every minute, say, yes? And so he doesn't use the same way to choose which computer to probe. He will use 3 different strategies. First, he will choose one of the computer in the local network, say with the same prefix, or the local area network, if you know networks, as under the same administration. And then he will spend a certain amount of time randomly choose a computer across the whole internet. So you basically generate a random number from 0 to 2 to the power of 32. And then you just think that number is the IP address, then send that package there. So that could be any computer of all the millions, billions computer on the internet. And a certain amount of time, choose one computer in the next 10 neighbor local area network next to its own network. So suppose my computer infected at computer science department. So some other colleagues in the same department will be infected. And the next few departments next to my building will also have a chance. That is neighborhood spreading. And it also spend time search everything on the whole internet. And you can imagine which is more effective. I was thinking the local area network. Why? Because all our computers are similar. We might use the same machine, same configuration, same firewall, everything the same. If my computer is vulnerable to this particular worm, maybe all my colleagues are also vulnerable. So that probing has a much higher successful rate. But if you randomly pick up a computer, the successful rate is very low. Why? Because that computer might be completely different from yours. Yes. Let's look at another example. Inside our human body, HIV virus, these little balls you can see. Yes. They will infect T cells, a particular T cells called CD4 plus T cells. These are the two cells. The purple one has been infected by the virus. Yes, and what happens is that once this virus enters your bloodstream somehow, and it will infect T cells, and then this T cell will basically become a production factory for this T cell, and at a certain point, this virus will be coming out, emitted by this cell. In the end, the cell itself actually will burst, will release thousands or even 100,000 of virus, and it will, go to infect another T cell, another T cell. In the last 20 or 30 years, most researchers focused on one particular spreading mechanism that is called cell-free spreading. That's equivalent to the global spreading in the previous example. So they only focus on how those free virus flowing in our bloodstream will accidentally encounter with a T cell and then infect that T cell. Yes, so they developed all sorts of drugs, the cocktail treatment, all the other, many other treatment like, pumping all your blood and basically replace all your blood with fresh, clean blood. See how it happens. Yes. However, in the last 3 years, some of my colleagues at UCL, they discovered the second channel, that the HIV virus can be spread between T cells with a different channel that we didn't know in the past. It's called cell-to-cell spreading. That's a local kind of spreading. What happens is that we have lymph nodes around our body. Inside the lymph node, there are a high concentration of T cells. They are so packed to each other, so they have a much higher chance to form something called synapses. So basically, temporarily, two cells will link with each other. They will actually exchange a little bit of their liquid. Yes, inside that exchange liquid, there are some virus will jump to the other cell directly. Yes, so in this local spreading channel, the infection rate is much, much higher because once they form a synapse, almost certainly the other cell will be infected. But in blood streams, you know that our actual blood circulates in an incredibly high speed. For the virus to attach to a T cell, it's quite difficult. So the chance is very low, not that easy to infect another one. So clearly, there are two spreading mechanisms. No wonder I would think, why all this treatment doesn't, produce very good results, because they only consider one of the spreading mechanisms. Later on, we will come back to these two examples with more details. So exactly what kind of, let's say, there are actually two types of hybrid epidemics, we realize. One of them is non-critical hybrid epidemics. In this case, say, let's consider two different spreading mechanisms. One with a very high infection, is more infectious than the other. So if we measure their final outbreak size, if we just use this single spreading mechanism, this one can reach more nodes than the other spreading mechanisms. So if you combine these two together, mix them together, you might achieve some infection outbreak size in between. So most researchers in the past say, the mixture of two spreading mechanisms doesn't make sense. Why? Why not just use the most infectious one of the two or of the three? Why mix them? It just makes the whole spreading process weaker. Yes, but actually, they didn't realize there is another type of hybrid epidemic. That's a part that I'm particularly interested. We first time discovered that there are critical hybrid epidemics. If you use one of the spreading mechanisms, either use A or B, there is no outbreak at all because they're so weak, they wouldn't cause any infection. Yes? Only if you mix them together, suddenly they become very, very infectious. At a certain point, if you mix them with the optimal proportion or ratio, they will reach the maximum outbreak size. It becomes very, very powerful and very, very infectious. Think about the internet worm Conficker example. if this worm only spread inside the local network, it won't cause any problem, isn't it? If it only do the global spreading, you know that infection rate is so low, such that if it's so low, the epidemic will die out by itself because it won't, infect enough new, nodes before itself being cleaned up. So it will be so weak below the threshold, so no outbreak at all. But the combination of these two simple, ineffective mechanisms will give you a very strong, powerful spreading phenomenon. That's called critically hybrid, epidemic. And after our study, we realized that where will we find this critically hybrid epidemic? We found that they mostly happen in a population called metapopulation. That is, a population consists of a number of subpopulations. I mean, subpopulation can think of as a cluster or community inside a larger population. Think this is all the people in the society, but they are not really equally linked with each other. They have different groups, yes? And inside of the group, they are more tightly interconnected, they're closer, more frequently visit each other. But between groups, they perhaps have less frequent or weaker connections among them. So such that, if you spread something in a local cluster, you have a higher infection rate. But if you want to spread randomly to someone far away in another community, it's weaker. So it's exactly like the HIV spreading in our body, where, blood stream like this, lymph nodes like this. Or the internet, worm spreading local networks, and together they form the global network. Yes, inside of this kind of system, actually think about the whole society, everything on the social media networks, the society. Meta population is actually a basic structure for most of the large systems. Yes, so we propose a simple generic model called the meta population model, where we consider a simplified structure, and we just consider two spreading mechanisms, local one with high infection rate, global one with a relatively low spreading rate, and we use this SIR model, so means the node initially is susceptible, means clean, ready to be infected, and then after it's infected, it becomes infectious, it will spread to other nodes, and then after a while, it will recover, so it will stop spreading the virus further, and it will stay like that forever. So with this relatively simple model, we do a lot of mathematical analysis. I purposely skip all the math. If you're interested, you can look at our paper. There are pages of mathematical analysis. So in the end, the conclusion is such: we can actually predict what is the threshold. Above the threshold, when this condition is met, then there will be a infection process will spread to a certain population, and this threshold is relevant to the two infection rate of the two spreading mechanism. Of course, is relevant to the recovery rate as well, but critically, it's also relevant to the proportion of the local spreading. Say, alpha is 0.4, means 40% of the time you do local spreading. So it means 60% of the time you do the other one, the global spreading, yes? And the alpha plays a key role there. So if we fix all other properties, this one represents the topology of that local population. So if we fix all the others, just change alpha, the property of this epidemic will change massively, yes? And we can also predict at any time what is the number of those clean nodes there. I mean, if we know the number of clean nodes, we can also work out what is the infected nodes at that time and what is the recovery node at that time. Also, we can predict the final outbreak size. So, for SIR kind of epidemic, that epidemic cannot go forever. At one point, it will stop. When it finally stops, what is the total number of nodes that have ever been infected and then recovered? We can actually predict them all. And yes, and actually our model's theoretical prediction very well coincident with the numerical simulation. And from these results, it's very clear that, by change the spreading, oh yes, we can perhaps click here. By changing the ratio where the two spreading mechanisms mix together, we can change the total outbreak size massively. And here is the optimal point, where it looks like 0.45. If that's our alpha value, then we will get a very high reproductive number. That means that number represents, on average, how many new nodes a node will infect in its lifetime, yes. And close to 2 is a very, very high number, yes. And we also can show that we can actually predict what exactly is the optimal trade-off alpha value for given other parameters. So this model make us feel very strongly that indeed this critically hybrid epidemic can be a powerful thing. So now let's look at these two examples again with the knowledge that we learned from that meta-population. So think about these 3 spreading mechanisms. As I said, the global spreading far-reaching but very weak. The local spreading very effective, very infectious, but it's confined to a local area. Yes, and the neighborhood spreading is basically a larger scale local spreading. If you are the designer of the worm, which mechanism will you spend most time or more time on that? Yes, have a guess? Who wanna guess? Will you spend most of your time to global spreading or the local spreading? We actually know the infection rate here. For the local spreading, literally 1 in 3 times you will infect another node. So for randomly, if you try 3 of your colleagues, the chance is that 1 of the 3 you will infect the other. And the neighborhood spreading, because it target the 10 next neighbors, so it's basically 1/10 of the local spreading. But think about the local spreading. It's very, very weak. So you will successfully infect 1 random node if you try more than 10 million times. Try 10 million times, you get 1 infected. So in this case, which one should spend more time, local or global?
Well, it depends when you are, actually.
Yes.
Because initially local is great, but then you've already infected all your neighbors, so it's a waste of time to keep trying.
Yeah, so if you want to design this epidemic, you don't know where you are, yes? So on balance, what is your best bet? Because most worm, they can't change, they can't, customize their parameter, their intelligence. They actually follow a initially set, ratio and do that, just carry out. Yes. The answer is such that from real measurement data, we can find out that Conficker choose to bet on the global spreading. So it basically spends 90% of the time on global spreading, 5% on local, 5% on neighborhood. And now let's think about, is this the best strategy it has? And we also know other parameters, recovery rate. So for every 10 minutes time window, the chance for a node to be recovered is 6%. So that translates to about 2.5 hours on average, a node will be recovered. Means once the computer is infected, on average, in 2.5 hour time, either your antivirus software get updated or something happened with your local, technician. He will actually clean up this virus. So this virus cannot last longer than 2.5 hours. That's actually quite short period of time, isn't it? And it cannot send out too many probing packages. What we have observed is that in every 10 minutes, it sends out about 80 probing packages. So it's about 8 in every 1 minute. Why such a low rate? Because if you send out too many probing packages, you will actually raise alarm. You will get yourself be cleaned up sooner. So better keep that very low. So pretend nothing happens. You can go on for a longer period of time. Then, because of this short period of time of life and very limited number of probes you can have, so there are 2 conflict requirements. Some might argue that because the global spreading is so ineffective, you should spend most of your time do this ineffective thing, yes? Because for the local ones, we have a high chance to infect them. So even if I put 5% of my time, I might still infect all of them anyway, yes? And before my life finishes, yes? But the other side, people would say, no, you should spend more time on local spreading. Why? Because every new local computer infected, they will immediately start to do this global spreading, join you in the army to do this, yes. And also make sure that you infected all the local nodes before you yourself being cleaned up. Think about it. If in 2.5 hours you have 200 local neighbors you could have infected, but you didn't. You only infected half of them. That would be a huge loss. Why? Think about it. If you don't find them in the local network, you find them somewhere else. The chance is 1 in 10 million. So everyone you missed here, that's a huge, unforgivable, problem. So there is two arguments here. It's difficult to work out which one is better. But it looks like the designer of this particular worm, he takes the first argument. He thinks we should focus on the global spreading. But we have our model. We have the meta-population model. We can find out what is the best optimal ratio, isn't it? But before we use that model, we first verify whether that model can be applied to configure worm. The result turns out, yes, exactly. These are the measurement dots. And this curve is a prediction by the meta-population model. Use this parameter that we mentioned. So you can see, we can accurately predict, at each hour point, how many are going to be infected. So the model definitely works very beautifully here. Then we can examine the optimal trade-off there. It turns out that the amount of time spent on the global spreading, if you only spend about 40% of time on global spreading, you actually will infect more nodes than you use 80 or 90% of the time. With 90 or 80% of the time, you will perhaps infect that many, but by reducing the amount of time spent on global spreading, you will infect more nodes. How many more? 50% more nodes. And more importantly, you will infect that 50% more nodes with half of the time. The speed of the spreading will also accelerate. The speed will more than double than that. So actually, the story is such that if the designer of the Conficker worm knew what we know now, he can very conveniently just change that single parameter from 90% to 40% just by changing that one single value. The same worm could be 50% more infectious, and that worm will be spread around twice as fast. Yes. So that means the worm could be more deadly infectious, than we already know. Although this already, as I said, is on record the most infectious worm we have observed, but we can easily make it more powerful. So the lesson here is simple, that it is possible to combine simple things to build a much, much powerful spreading epidemic. And that is a double-edged sword. Why? If you are someone try to, say, spread good news on social media, you can think about how to design your spreading mechanism, perhaps use this critically hybrid, strategy, such that it will spread fast and, to a large, area. But it will make, if what you spread is a better thing, like a rumor or like a virus, a disease, then you will make all the defense and the immunization jobs much, much more difficult. Think about it. Why the Conficker worm has spread so violently on internet? We have so many mechanisms, all the security defense on internet, but they cannot stop that one, because all the existing defense strategies will not stop a hybrid epidemic. Why? Unless you have installed firewall or antivirus softwares on all computers on the internet, then the problem will solve. The problem is that about 30% of computers on internet don't have any defense mechanism at all. No firewall, no antivirus software, none of them. Yes, and then this virus will always find some local vulnerable networks. Yes, and whenever they find a single computer in that local network, he will find actually a cluster of computers, all similarly vulnerable to this. And he will infect all the local ones, and all the local ones will spread, massively, to, launch millions of, probes around the internet. He will, find other bits around the, every corner of the internet. Yes, he will find all of the vulnerable, local networks and exhaust them all. That no wonder they will be very, powerful. So if you say, I want to protect the important local networks, it doesn't help, because the problem is the existence of the vulnerable, remote little networks. Today, the UK government actually have a special team of 6 people. Keep an eye on this Conficker worm. Why? Because we still say that this worm is evolving. Now we have the 3rd generation. They still infect more and more computers. And it is very worrying. What are they up to? Imagine if they can control a few million computers and they can launch some attack maybe one day. So it's important that we should develop new defense and immunization strategy against such worms. Coming back to this HIV in viral infection, it's much, much more complicated. I don't want to go into the detail. I mean, look at here. Even each cell has 4 status. It's because some T cells actually can fall in sleep, basically, and then later they're going to randomly wake up. So they have 4 different status. But the importantly is that we propose this model. In our model, we considered both of the infection mechanism, different from all previous models. They only consider the cell-free infection. Yes, and obviously, a series of differential equations have been used to describe the dynamics of this complicated systems, and many 6 variables. That's the quantity that we're interested to predict, and 18 parameters. And all these parameters actually have already been measured quantitatively in literature. So we know how these systems works, but we didn't have such a coherent model to actually describe how this system works. It turns out that our model is the first and only model so far that can accurately reproduce the full course of HIV infection. Why I say full course is important, because once a person is infected, there are a number of different stages. Firstly, he was suddenly falling ill so much. He will have high temperature. Feel very sick. But without any treatment, each of them will recover by themselves. Yes, and it will suddenly drop down the density of virus in your blood. But you will not be cured. Why? Because halfway through, still very high density of this virus. It will stop there, and that will last for a couple of years. Yeah, so that's 150 weeks. That's almost 3 years. Then during this period of time, it will gradually consume and exhaust your immune system. In the end, your body becomes so weak, your T cell density will suddenly drop because you can't afford. You have used up all your reserves, all your ability to reproduce your T cell. At that point, this virus suddenly shoot up, and this person dies in a few weeks' time because its immune system failed. So with such a complicated, several stage, process, our model can produce each detail of this. Go up, go down, stay, and go here. Especially this bit is difficult. Yes. So it's like you drop a ball from a high ground. but it didn't hit the ground. Halfway through, it stops. You can imagine there is a very strong force there to hold it. What is that strong force hold it? Yes. So we actually explain, there are a number of mechanisms. One of them, importantly, is the second spreading channel that we didn't know in the past. Because that cell-to-cell spreading becomes much, much more effective if the patient is very sick. Yes. So with this missing piece, the whole story suddenly becomes, a full story. You can explain everything happens there. Without that missing bit, we can't explain that story. And in London, in North London, at this research center, they recruit HIV patients. And these patients, volunteer themselves to be tested and examined at the center. So what do they do is that they say they will not take any medicine and will not take any treatment. They just let the disease run its natural course. And so this center basically measures their, this virus density in their blood, over a period of time. So compared with these two patients, this one lived almost, 1,400 days, but this one lived just about 3 years. So why it's important to find out their natural cause of this HIV? Because without this background knowledge, we don't know whether a treatment is effective or not. For example, if we give this person some medicine and some treatment, and he lives up to 1,400 days, we don't know whether this person will live that long anyway without treatment, or it's just because of treatment he lived 400 days long. So it's very important to have this, natural, cause, measurement data. But the problem is that it's very cruel. Think about it. This data, you get it, one set of data is a person's life. Here we have about, 2 dozens of patients. They means these patients, they basically, allow the researchers to get the data, the cost is their life. They might live much shorter than they could have been. But with our model, we actually can predict the course very accurately, these blue curves, just by taking some measurement at their initial stage, say 30 days or 6 days after their infection. If we measured their bloodstream density and T cell density, just 3 parameters, then we can actually predict how long they're going to live anyway. Then from that point, this patient can actually go through a treatment and take drugs as they know, because then we know how long they're going to live without the treatment. So in the end, we can tell how effective that medicine is. Yes. So that's the value of this this model. So basically, I think our contribution is twofold. Firstly, that we show and explain why cell-to-cell spreading is such an important element you shouldn't ignore, and in particular, it becomes more and more effective as the infection progresses. So it means, the first half, maybe the cell-free spreading is important, but the second half, it's more importantly, it actually happens in your lymph nodes. It's a cell infection. So that's why, even we can't observe the virus in your blood. So for example, when you do that test, get some blood and test, the density of virus is very low. But then after a few months, we find that the disease come back. Why? Because we don't have to rely on this cell-free infection. Yes, the nodes, the T cells, infected T cells in your lymph node can spread to each other anyway. And more importantly, this is first mathematical framework that can allow us to reliably evaluate future treatment strategies. Yes, hopefully that will help to tackle this disease soon. And our work has attracted a lot of media attention in the past few years. If you search this HIV spread and the Conficker worm, you will find perhaps 20 or 30 newspaper articles on this work. And our future work, I think, first of all, now we understand there is a very powerful strategy there, spreading strategy there. So we should think about new defense strategies to fight against such a very infectious epidemic. Yes, as I said, most of the existing strategies won't work, and that explains why we think we have, set up so many, mechanisms. But once a real epidemic appears, then it seems that all those systems don't work. Maybe I would say the reason that those are hybrid epidemics. Yes, if that's so, you can't stop them. Yes, and also I think we need to do some study about this information diffusion in society and cyberspace. Why? If you look at most research, on information spreading in society, they basically talk about one or two spreading mechanisms. They haven't really appreciated the, the explosive, magnified, effect by combining different channels. Think about how many channels do we have to receive information. We receive emails, we see it from social media networks. Those actually are local spreading. We read from newspapers, hear it from radio, see it on TV, and see on a poster by the road. Those actually are global spreading. Yes, low infection rate, but far-reaching. And so many different channels combined together will explain why the information spread so fast. Think about one thing. One day when Apple announced a new product, literally within 24 hours next day, you and your colleagues all know that. And you know that from all sorts of different channels. That is extremely efficient. Yes. So I think that there is because here is the Alan Turing Institute. I think we are very interested in all sorts of data. Many data, social media data, online data, social network data. I think there is a chance that if we can have a coherent, view on this, so work out how information exactly is spread on society. Yeah. So the application could be many. Yes. So how to design a advertisement campaign, for example, to spread your message more effectively and faster. Yes. And or how to develop a strategy to stop something from spreading. Like when there is a terrorist attack, you want to alert all the people. How can I immediately let everyone know, stay home, or get away from tube, station, something. So how can we make sure that message reach the vast portion of the population in the shortest period of time? Yeah, so what's the combination of that? Shall I announce them mostly on TV, or shall I spend some time, spread that on, social media as well? What's the best combination of that? If I have a fixed budget, where are you going to spend your money on advertisement, on, all the thing? So that has, a real impact as well. All right, that's all my talk. Thank you very much.